Yeah, dude.
Yeah,
That's
I button is a thing I want to run into. I've never ran into I
yeah,
button.
never seen one.
I hear it's big in Europe. I mean, I've seen
Mhm.
them like, randomly, like in a garage or whatever, like, but not while I'm on a pin fence. I have not ran into
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Like, I've seen them throughout my life, but I'm like, man, I would love to, because those are really easy to brute force right here. I don't know. I want to play with one. It's a new technology for me.
Yeah. No, that definitely that'd be fucking sweet. I would love to. I have to. I wish there was just maybe a class or something like that where you kind of just learn all that stuff.
Yeah,
But sadly, most of it is just like you have to do it on your own or you're not going to do it.
maybe you should
So
make a class.
I thought about it. I'm like, but my biggest thing is quality. So like I like to make sure people get value. So even with we put on or I put on the online course that I've been teaching for the last I like to say last 4 or 5 months. And so at this point, we've done 5 online classes, and this is just an intro to lockpicking. So this is
Okay.
like bare minimum. Basically, what I do is I get all the locks, their tools, I test out all their locks, I'll put the binding order on them. And so I've gotten to the point now where I've been able to make sure that I teach people single pin picking overline and they have success with single pin picking online. That's already super fucking
Well,
hard to do.
it is, and you're good at it because I've seen methods that you use that I have started using to teach people because we go to conferences and we bring lock picks and it's a great conversation starter to for people who walk by a booth. Hey, you learn how to pick a lock, and we're hanging out having a conversation, show them how to pick a lock, and they learn something useful and maybe it turns into a business thing. And
Yeah.
we the thing where you put washers on to show like the proper amount of force, that's the most useful thing I've ever seen for showing people how to pick a log, because how much pressure do you put? I'm like, the right amount. Like
The right amount. Yeah. Yeah. It's super subjective. So it's hard as hell to be like, yo, this is how much force to put on, especially when it's subjective between person to person. And it's like, well,
yeah,
okay, well, let me find something objective to put on here. So that way I'm like, hey, here's the weight. That is how much you're going to need to fucking put on that log. And that is help. And that's not even an original idea. So I make sure, like, I tell people that shit all the time. The biggest thing I want to avoid is being called like a fraud or stealing someone's credit.
sure,
That is
yeah,
that is a reputation ruiner. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna be super upfront with everything that I am and everything that I taught. And I was like, this has worked out. And I even posted it on Reddit, and people were like, everyone thought it was super helpful. It's probably like about one of the highest rated fucking Reddit posts on the R lockpicking page that I've ever seen. And people were like, this was so helpful. And I was like, the very next comment I put after originally posting it, I was like, this is not an original concept, just a highly effective one. Made sure I put that shit out on Front Street. Boom. And then
yeah,
literally maybe 40 comments down the page. You guys like, oh, like Bosby and Bill taught this and blah, 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 blah. And I said, see first comment. Not original. I made sure that shit was up front, dude. I was like, this is not
right,
original, man.
right.
I am not here to
Oh
steal
yeah,
credit
man.
from fucking anybody.
I never
But
I never saw Bosby and Bill post that. I mean, that's why it's important for I've subbed to Bosby and Bill forever. I mean, I don't know where the hell that guy's at nowadays, but I
yeah.
mean, he's one of the OGs. He's
Yeah. Oh
he's
yeah.
he's great. He's great. But yeah, no, I never even saw that. And so
Yeah. So
that's
he did it for a different reason. So the reason he did it was to show I think it was like serrated pins or something like that, and basically how they work. And that's how I originally showed it. And I was like, you know what? That's a good ass idea. I was like, well, let me see if I can do this in a class and see if this actually like it'll show people like, hey, this is what a false set looks like. You're watching, boom, and they're like, holy shit, like I didn't see that. Like here's counter rotation. And even for the people that have been picking for a long time, they're like, oh, well, counter rotation is a result of the pin trying to push up and past the shear line. That's what's causing the counter rotation. I was like, yes. And they were like, I never knew that before. He's like, this video is super duper helpful. And that's what even more advanced pickers. And I was like, oh, yes,
yeah.
that is nice. So like I'm looking to like essentially dummy proof lockpicking and plug the holes in like the explanations for certain things. Um, and that's been like one of my biggest things for like the online course specifically. I was like, hey, I'm here to demystify the fuck out of this whole skill set and be like, this is why this works. Like I even explained the binding order and why it occurs, right? And there are other websites that have done that before, but once again, people don't look for the information. So I'm like, here, I'm gonna spoon feed this to you because this is what you're paying
Yep.
me for.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh,
No, I think it's awesome. I for sure do. Well, I wanted to talk about you. You mentioned you're trying to get more into like the cyber kind of the stuff. What are you doing there? You talking cyber as related to FISEC or kind of infosec style
so
stuff?
I have a buddy of mine who works over in the he's a not a PSYOP instructor, but he works in the schoolhouse that teaches a lot of cyber stuff. Um, and basically I'm like, all right, man. And I'm like, so what's the first step? And he's like, dude, one, download Kali Linux. It's like download a virtual machine to get some reps in. He's like, so you can fuck virtual machine up and just destroy it. So he's like, that's a safe space to kind of fuck around and do stuff in. So I started off with that. So I have Kali Linux downloaded. I kind of mess around with certain things, but I feel like you don't really get the real reps until like you got to know more to like really apply it in real life. Like I'm doing stuff that's super simple, like a deauth attack and stuff like that. So he's like, yeah, it's like deauth attack is super fucking easy. This is what you do. You send a fuck ton of packets to this thing and just, I was like, okay, cool. That makes sense. Um, so if someone could do a course like that, where they're like, hey, this is like the 101 to using specific hacking attacks, like John the Ripper. Here's how you use John the Ripper. You target a computer, and like this is how you get the password hash, and this is how you translate the password hash to the actual password and stuff like that. It's like, oh, that's dope, man. Like I didn't know that's exactly how you apply that shit. So
Well, what's interesting is a lot of people they say things like you have to learn everything inside and out in order to hack it, or you have to know the ins and outs of the system, and you have to be a Windows expert and a Linux expert. Like, look, I'm principal engineer alias. Maybe I need to, because I train people how to do this and I find new methods. And
yeah,
like, okay, sure, but like you don't actually need that to be effective. Where you're familiar with the ransomware group Conti by chance?
yes, I've
They
heard. I think I've heard of
they had an insider leak all their stuff, and we looked at all their stuff, and
it.
what we found is they had incredibly effective documentation for how to do their compromises in order for how to own a whole network. Basically, it was like do this. It was like if this then this, if this then this, if this then this.
Wow,
All the way,
dude, that's
and it
that's
wasn't
impressive.
people who are cybersecurity experts necessarily doing it, right? It was people
Right.
who know their way around computers a little bit, who have the instructions. And it was so interesting to me to see that, where it's like, okay, this is essentially proof that all these people who say you have to be an expert in
It's a
XYZ and
form of
like, look,
gatekeeping.
it is
Yeah.
like, no, you actually don't have to do that. Like, to be as good as you can possibly be, yeah, sure, there's levels to the shit, right? Same with
Yes.
lock picking. In order to
Yep.
pick a lock, you don't need to know everything about a lock. I can teach
Hmm.
somebody how to pick a shitty master lock in 30 seconds.
Exactly.
Here's a city rank, just lift the fucking pins up. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So I like to tell people, I'm like, but by what I mean, the levels to this thing, you said it perfectly, right? Um, but what are the levels? I think beginner level is just being able to apply the skill. Intermediate level is to being able to I would say possibly apply it in real life. The pro level is when you can create, problem solve. I would say create solutions and trouble essentially troubleshoot. Because as a beginner, I know how to do the thing, but if it doesn't work, why did it not work? You're not going to understand the why it didn't work as a beginner. As an intermediate person, you may understand the why it didn't work, but don't know how to create a solution in order to make sure that it works. I think
yeah,
that's where the giant separation between intermediate and advanced lies. It's like, well, why didn't this work? Okay, cool. I'm going to now create a solution for this problem on the spot to make sure it works. So I was like, I think that's the biggest difference between like the skill levels of like, you're like, okay, cool. I can troubleshoot at intermediate, but now I can troubleshoot, I can actually create an actual solve for the problem I'm running into right now. Because
yeah,
you have such an advanced knowledge of what's going on and you can break that shit just down. And you're like, all right, cool. I do
yes,
this, and I'm done. Like, cool.
exactly. Yeah, like you said, there's the levels to it, and it's like in order to just be moderately effective, like you don't necessarily need all that. Like you still have to understand some stuff. Like don't get me wrong, the random people who like they can't figure their printers out, they're probably not a chance for them. But like if you know your way around a computer reasonably well, and like you kind of understand a little bit about like how do I connect to things remotely, like what is SSH, very very basics. That it's like I can probably give you a step by step on how to like these are the 50 steps involved in likely domain compromise. And like I think that yeah, for sure. There should probably be some effective classes about that. And there's some stuff, but I think that in InfoSec, people, I don't want to say it's a bad thing because I don't want to discourage learning, but people are really bad about like, hey, this is how your antivirus, your EDR works, and let's deep dive this. Let's deep dive this one topic. Like, how about you just cover the effect of this and then move on?
Yeah.
And like get your that's how I feel about it, at least.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree with that. And I think there are times where you need advanced people doing certain things, because you essentially need a surgeon's knife in order to do it without fucking something really causing a lot of damage, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the one thing I can think of that came to mind was, I think it was Darknet Diaries, and they were like doing some work on a hospital or something like that. And they found their way inside of a machine of some sort that was actively operating on somebody. I was like, oh shit, like that's bad. Like someone not knowing like that advanced level knowledge would have been like, you know what? Yep, sure, shut it down. Boop, and fuck someone up. And it's like, well, that's where that surgeon's knife is kind of needed in the skill set, to be like, all right, cool. I understand, like, oh shit, one, this is actively being used right now. Maybe I don't touch this. And then you're like, I understand enough about this to be like, you know what, let me back out of this. And in the, I think on the operational side, especially if you're not doing this as a pen test or as a red team or something like that, is once again the forensic side, right? Understanding how to conduct the attack without being found out after you're done doing the thing.
So, and that's a lot of like the difference between a pen test and a red team.
And a red team, right? Yeah. Is your scope. Yeah, your scope of like, I'm like penetration test, I'm finding the vulnerabilities for this thing. Here are my parameters. This is what I can and cannot do. Red team, I'm a full-on adversary. There is no like I won't say no holds bar, but you're a full-on adversary.
Well, sure there's also objective of the red team is to train the blue team and or test the blue team, typically. So what I'm doing is I'm going to have specific attacks. What is the threats that you guys are concerned about? Let's say you said kind of specific, but nation state level attack is happening to this particular organization. It is North Korea targeting it. There's enough info there. There's enough IOCs to know what North Korea does. We know how they do recon. We know how they do their initial breaches. We know how they do lateral movement. We know how they do privilege escalation. We know what they do and everything from there. It's happened several times. We have all their IOCs. Cool. I can emulate that one for one.
Right.
I can be your North Korea to go, okay, this is and that's exactly it, where it's like, I'm not going to use what I would do in a pen test to very quickly hit a whole network and do it's not that. This is your threat. Can you find it if it happens? And like, that's really the big difference a lot of the time. And yeah, of course, it's typically like, hey, here's our organization, go. It's less more of like, these are the IP addresses that you attack, go. Like, or this is the address that you attack. And I love whenever people give us red teams where it's like, hey, we're just worried about the worst somebody could do. Physical's on the table, phishing's on the table, vishing's on the table, give us a phone call, whatever, everything's on the table. We're just like, all right, cool.
Yeah. Let the mischief begin.
Yeah. We love those. We get a few of those a year, like a handful of them a year. We don't, not enough. I wish they're all like that. But yeah. Usually whenever people want that, we give them a pretty good deal. So anybody watching this?
The shameless plug real quick.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're here to have fun. Like, we're here to help people and have fun. I mean, that's really what it is. Like, I used to be a network engineer. I can go be a network engineer again. Like, fuck that. This is great.
Yeah, man, you get to be a legal criminal, man. It's like the closest thing I get to do for that is like if I get contracted out under my own company. Like I don't do that for the Army, right? Like I've tried to, obviously I talked to a couple of guys that work over like the Special Forces Sniper School and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, like, do you guys have an entry guy? And obviously there's organizations that do like specialized advanced skills on that side of the house, but they don't work for that organization. Like they might come down as a favor and be like, hey, here's a couple of things you guys can learn. I'm like, do you guys need a dedicated instructor? Like who, like if I had your resources along with my training knowledge and how I can build out scenarios to replicate the things you guys are going to run into, I absolutely can do that because I've done
Oh
the things
yeah.
operationally. I've done it in real life where danger is actually present. So I'm like, I can replicate those things. So I'm like, that's way too fucking easy. I was like, you give
Yeah.
me the resources. I was like, if y'all can give me, if y'all have me work for you guys, I can absolutely make sure your guys are that have enough competence to apply the skill set operationally.
Heck yeah, man. That would
Yeah,
be super cool. That would be
that's
incredible.
easier said than done, man. Like the problem with large organizations and bureaucracies is that they move at the speed of drying paint, dude. They're
Right. Right.
molasses, dude. Super slow. They're like, how
Yeah.
are we spending this money? Do we really need this guy? So it's just like, God, I'm not trying to fight nonstop to prove worth. It's like if y'all can't see that your guys need this skill, like y'all need to start asking yourselves questions
Yep.
about are we actually trying to keep these guys alive and give them the tools they need to increase their survivability.
And
So
once you know these skills, it's mind blowing that they don't.
yeah,
Like,
seriously, bro. Like I went to the real world sniper competition, right? And they're nothing but like soft, snipers from everywhere. Green Berets, Navy SEALs, sniper house and sniper schoolhouse instructors. You fucking name it. They're all there. Most of them don't know anything about covert entry. I'm like, this is an extremely adjacent skill set for y'all's job. I'm really surprised y'all don't know this.
yep.
And yeah, so now I'm just like, how can we get this like put in as a part of y'all's normal curriculum? I'm like, because it should be, even if it's 2 days. I can teach you more in 2 days than you're probably going to learn anywhere in SEER or anything. Like SEER school, they teach a little bit of a block on lockpicking, but they teach it in the context of I am getting away. I was like, those are two very different objectives of getting away and getting in. Very different. One's defensive and one's offensive.
Right.
So it's like there's a lot more that goes into the offensive side, as you know this. So like having them understand how to pack out for that specific use case of like, all
Right.
right, cool. How do I conduct recon in order to understand exactly what I'm about to run into on the place I'm trying to get into? And then what's just my kind of general carry. So that way, if I run into a place I need to get into, I still can get in. And then minimize my kit so that way I can just keep it on me and I'm always kind of
Yeah.
ready for this level of threat of obstacle. So it's like, all right, well,
Yeah.
that's the stuff I figure out for them and like these SWAT teams and stuff like that. It's like, hey, here's a general enough bag to get you into most things, and it's not bulky, right?
Yeah.
Which does require you to be well practiced. You have to practice. It is a very
Have you
degradable skill set.
I have one thing I was wanting to ask before I forget. So do you guys do much OSINT in the stuff you're doing?
Yes, for the scenario we do. So once again, that's also kind of relegated to the advanced course.
Sure.
It's way more hands on. So like a part of the packing list is bringing your laptop. So you bring your laptop because we're like, all right, cool. Here's the business. We want you to get some general information about them. So I want you to be able to answer at least 6 questions. One, what are their operating hours? Two, do they have security? Three, do they have security roaming on the inside? Four, like just a bunch of stuff, right? Do they have cameras and what cameras do they have? What angles do they take? And so like we'll literally have like a sky view of the facility that they're supposed to hit. And then we have them draw out and map out every single camera that's on the building and essentially like the angle of view. So that way, if you're able to see if there's a dark spot or there's a blind spot of the camera that you can move in on, you can do that. So we do that for like a really small portion of it. As far as gathering information on the actual target, we don't do as much of that. That we do
Okay.
more so of like, hey, can you gather information online? And really, it's this cool thing called Google Maps, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, Google Maps, CalTopo or CalTopo. That's another one we use.
We use the shit out of Google Maps for OSINT.
Dude, Google
I
Maps is
mean,
goofy, bro. Like it is
yeah.
so fucking nice. And you can
Yeah.
answer all those questions off the rip. So it's
Yeah.
like, well, another thing I wanted to kind of hop into was like security system defeat, which is a whole nother realm. And people like this is the crazy part about like the entry realm in general is it's so fucking diverse. It is, and it's super specialized. Like people are like, "Oh, do you guys do auto entry?" I'm like, "Can I get into cars?" Yes, but am I an auto entry guy? No. Like those type of dudes,
Same.
they're not casuals by any means, dude. Like they're either criminal and they're really really good, or they're employed by the government and they're really really good. And usually these guys learn from these guys.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
like there are no casuals when it comes to auto entry. There are no casuals when it comes to breaking into safes. Like there's just
Yeah.
certain things like where it's just like you're really, really specialized. Like my buddy Cameron Bay works over in California and he's a safe tech. He's a safe tech, so he does a lot of safe work, does a lot of destructive entry. He does a lot of work with like the feds and stuff too. And they're like, hey, we got to get in really, really fast. We'll employ this guy because we know he's fast on getting in. Super high rate of success. So with shit like that, it's just like that's the complexity and the nuance of the skill. And it's just like, yeah, man, like I don't know any dudes that are like they're casually into auto entry and they're really fucking good. Doesn't exist. They're usually
That's fair.
phenoms
Yeah.
and they're fucking criminals and they steal cars all the fucking time.
Right,
So,
right. Like I can, use the jigglers and I can do basic stuff.
yeah,
I can use a Slim Jim, air wedge to hit a lock. I can do the basic stuff. But yeah, whenever it comes to those guys who can like use specialized tools and actually get the car started and moving, I'm like, yeah, you're not where I'm at.
yeah, dude. And they're like, what was it? It was, I think it was like the Kia Boys or something like that. And they were just using like the Bluetooth exploit or whatever on the from the key fob, and they were
Yeah.
jacking tons of cars. Which means, guess what? They were also doing? They were also doing recon, and they were also
Yeah.
doing all the things that like people in the security realm do all the fucking time. And so it's super interesting to see like how that plays off on the other side of the fence, right? Like the criminal element, and they don't get enough. They don't get a lot of credit. And I'm like, dude, I'm like, there are some insanely smart criminals, and typically they're ahead of the curve. It's like most people are like, oh, criminals are dumb. I was like, no, the dumb criminals are dumb. I was like, the guys that are operating up here, they're either getting employed by the government or they haven't been caught yet.
Yes. And there's a lot of those guys who they make their living not necessarily even doing the crime, but showing criminals how to do the crime.
Yeah.
Where if you get into these certain, I've kind of really dove into a lot of that stuff and gotten into these Telegram chats and stuff like, invite only, where it's really sus. And you see these guys and it's like, yo, here's how you do this thing, cash at me this and I'll show you. And like, there's these dudes who maybe they're not doing it that much, but like they've got 800 dudes in this Telegram channel sending them $800 over Cash App to show them how to break into shit. And like
Yeah.
it's absolutely that's those guys aren't dumb. Like they're
At all. At fucking all, man. And like I said, it's super interesting to see how it all works. And people don't really understand the security, how in depth the security realm goes. They just think security, they're like, oh, like even right now, everyone's like, oh yeah, he's the lock picking guy. I'm like, brother, I was like, I teach way more than lock picking. But that's how I'll forever be known as the lock picking guy, which is like,
well, let's be real. Let's be real. If you get a video that goes viral, it's probably lock picking.
yeah.
Unfortunately,
a lot of the bypass stuff does too. Like the rec center stuff went wild. That's
like, actually true. Yeah,
they were freaking out. They were like, "What the hell did I just watch?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, that's a thing, man. That's And what else? What other electronic bypass? That's another thing that's pretty hot. Who is it? Surly Dirtbag, my buddy Nick. You might know him on Instagram. He does a lot of that electronic bypass, and people eat that shit up, dude. Eat it up.
Yeah, he seems really good at a lot of what he does for sure.
Yeah, because I think he is a locksmith, so he does a lot of that stuff on the side too. And that's the other end of the problem is exposure, right? So there's just a lot of different types of locking systems you're not going to be exposed to unless you work in the realm.
Absolutely,
that's the
absolutely.
Shit. So
one thing I've been talking about, going back to Flipper, you don't need to know stuff. You can just do stuff. Like the exploit that's getting popular right now for all of the handicap doors that just work on low frequency RF.
Yeah,
like that's incredible how much that works. I've been playing with that, and like not even on pen tests, but like I go visit a customer site and I'm like, I wonder, pull out the Flipper, holy shit, it works. Like,
It's like, yep, all right. That shouldn't work here, but all right.
I've also ran into some where like people don't necessarily do doors like they're supposed to a lot of the times, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yes.
And
Oh
sometimes they
yeah.
just put a fucking deadbolt in the door that's not supposed to have one.
Yep.
And
I
I have ran into where a deadbolt is stopping that. And I'm like, I guess that's a good thing. Like,
you inadvertently did security right.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Um, one of the biggest thing I've seen is the mismatching of parts for like solenoid strikes and like
Dude.
non-solenoid hardware. So like they'll have just straight up like regular ass latches going into like massive solenoid strikes. And I'm like, y'all can just Lloyd this, or you could just use like I use mica shims on the ones at the firehouse. Like everyone's like, oh, our doors are secure. I was like, no, they're not. I was like, one, like the first thing I'm looking for these doors like this, I'm like, one, I'm gonna play with the door handle real quick to see if there's any jiggle, if there's any give. That's gonna tell me one if you have those little fucking those little plastic pegs, the spacers on the inside of the door that keeps me from being able to create space by moving the door in and out.
Well, you can cut those off too.
Exact. Yep. That's I was good. I was just about to get there. I was like, you could take a small razor and just go
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
make your
Yeah.
space. Yep. So that was one of the things. I was like, hey, yeah, that's granted for firefighters, their context is a little bit different. So if it's not a like a health and welfare, which they commonly help police with when they have to do the forcible entry portion, we started teaching them that so we can save them some money, them in the city. So we're like, hey, like if it's a health and welfare, you can pick locks or bypass locks to get in instead,
Yep.
and instead of like using forcible entry, because a lot of the times like they told us that they've hit the wrong house before, or the person was like not present or something like that, and then they come home to a door that's absolutely destroyed, and it's like, oh shit, like that's a problem. So I was like, instead of doing that, I'm like, here, you guys have options, especially if you're working in a team environment. There was a class that we prefaced a lot of the stuff with as far as like the team aspect goes. I can't, I think it was in Australia or something like that. There was like a game going on or some sort, and there was a kid that caught a concussion. And so when the emergency vehicles arrived, the gate was locked, and it had one of those access control I won't say it, not a panel, but like the access control multiple lock setups on it. So each people, like there's 6 people that have a separate key that can also get in. One of those. And so there was a bunch of locks on there, and they were like they couldn't get in for 14 minutes. I said 14 fucking minutes, guy. Like so, like one person like ran to find the manager of that of the park, whatever, to get the key and some other shit. And I was like, no, that 14 minutes is egregious, like by all standards. So I'm like, one of you guys could have worked on picking the lock. One of you guys could have hopped the fucking fence. Somebody could have taken a pair of bolt cutters to the, or a pair of wire cutters to the fence and just cut up the fence and got in that way. There was a ton of things you guys could have done. And I was like, you guys were just stuck because you're looking at an obstacle that you've never dealt with, and you're like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, there's a billion ways to get past that shit, man. I'm like, I would have thrown the bag over the top and just climbed the goddamn fence if I had to. I'm like, a kid is over here possibly, maybe dying. We don't even know how hard he got hit in the head. I'm like, there's no way it should have taken you 14 fucking minutes to get past this fence.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right.
Yeah. So like people don't know how to like strategize that shit in your mind. And most people just think like entry stuff just is just like lock picks or shotguns or whatever. I'm like, brother, I have a pair of wire cutters right here, some knife picks wire cutters. Guess what, dude? You think I won't fucking cut my way up a fucking fence? I did that shit in Iraq to fucking find us a new HLZ. And we were on our way out leaving, and I was like, all right, cool. We went out in the dead of night, and I cut up this fucking fence line so everybody can move through it to get to the new landing zone. And I was like, yeah, man, that's a thing. Like you don't like, I'm not having people with 120-pound rucks hopping fences. Like, no, absolutely not. So I was like, all right, cool. Take my wire cutters, cut it at the top, cut the fucking, the steel ties, and rolled it back as soon as they got up to it. And obviously that kind of comes down to forensics too, because we wouldn't know that we had actually removed the fencing. So we put it back, we tied it back up, strapped it back up like nothing had ever happened. And all the way. And when we came back, I was like, all right, cool. Pop, pop, roll the fence back. And then everyone just walked through the fencing. So
nice. Yeah. That's that practical problem solving, man. That's what it is. Have you ever? So I have a Leatherman Surge with the replaceable wire cutters.
Carbide, yeah, the carbide teeth.
Yeah, the carbide teeth. Those things can do some work on.
They can. Only
It's
problem,
definitely not bolt cutters, but like,
yeah. So they're not really made to cut through actual fencing. So
no, and they will
it'll
break.
do it. Yeah, it'll do it a couple of times before it starts to chip, and then once they
Yes,
chip, that's it.
yes, yes.
So,
I keep a spare pair in with it because
mhm,
I've broken a few doing that, probably too many. I live, I live out in the country. Like, fencing is just
yeah,
it's part of life. And like,
yeah,
I've cut way more fence wire with those, and I've always wondered, like, man, these could cut through a chain link. Like
yeah,
you could do it for sure. Like, yeah, you
yeah.
might cut your
It's just
hand
a
off, but
matter of
like you
how
could do
much
it.
you have to do it and the
Yeah,
wear on the blade every time you make the cut again. So, like Knipex makes the Cobalt series or the
yeah,
compact bolt cutter series. They have a 6, 8, and a 10-inch. And so I did testing on all three of those sizes. So I bought all three sizes and I went through and I cut through fencing. The 6-inch will cut through fencing just fine. And then I also cut through C wire to see exactly where the
yeah.
threshold was for each of those sizes. 6 will absolutely not cut through C wire, concertina wire.
Really,
It's got a thick inlay on the inside of the actual C wire that gives it its shape to keep. And the 6 is not enough unless you got a crazy, crazy hand strength. You're not cutting through it. I used two hands and I couldn't cut through with the 6. I barely cut through with the 8, and I glided through it with the 10. And so just like that type of testing needs to be done consistently.
yeah,
If I'm going to carry him with me and I'm like, hey, I'm going to cut through whatever, like, yeah, you can cut through fencing easy with any of those and just, and you're good. And it's German engineering too. So like the teeth don't take damage. Like the pair I have now have been cutting through shit for the last like 2 years and the blades are fine. There's no chips in them. Like there's some paint wear and that's it. And so I'm like,
nice.
damn, that's some quality shit right there. Like I would stake my life on using these tools.
And who knows, you may have to. That's with using those tools. I mean, yeah, yeah, you have to know with those. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, where I'm focused on pen testing, of course, where life is usually not a thing, but it carries over just the same. And I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
if you're in a tight spot, you got to get away from something. I mean, you never know what circumstances you could find yourself in, and yeah, so
Yeah.
that makes me actually question. I've got my Harbor Freight, bolt cutters, and I've cut through some locks and stuff with them. And is
Sure.
it easy? No, it's not. They're not good. Uh, so now I'm thinking, man, I should probably grab a Knipex and upgrade. I've got some Knipex channel locks and stuff, and they're
Oh,
great. Yeah,
dude. I
I'm
haven't
sure their
even
bolt cutters are fantastic.
which kind do I have? Is it Klein or I'm trying to think of which one. Clutch. That's what it is. I have Clutch brand bolt cutters. I have from I think it's 14 inches all the way up to 42. So I have 14, 18, 24, 32, 36, and 42. So we use those all for the advanced course. And some of those do get broken because we literally test the threshold out of each of those sizes and find out where they stop. So like we like what size is practical to carry. So like they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna bring these bolt cutters. I'm like, well, how big are the bolt cutters? I'm like, what are you looking to cut with it? I'm like, you should know the threshold of each of those sizes, and if you don't, you're kind of taking a gamble there. So we were cutting what is it? It was a one of the larger brinks, but it has the boron carbide shackles. And it took 36-inch bolt cutters. It actually fucked the 32-inch up badly. Like it was rough. I was like, wow, that's surprising. That surprised me. So I was like, okay. They used a 32-inch and two grown men. It took two grown men to cut that thing like together. So it was like, and they're both heavy human beings,
What
bro. Like
what
one
lock was
guy,
that? That was a lock.
I think I might have one in here. Let me see. So one of these right here, and these used to be bypassable.
Okay.
I think it was Lockpick Moore were showing bypasses with the American bypass driver. Used to be able to use it on these, but they fixed that mistake. But we had them cut this. Once again, I have all the footage. I'll send it to you. And you had to see like two dudes were pressing against this thing on opposing ends. Like one dude is probably maybe 260 pounds, the other one's like 280. And they're both like pushing against this thing and they finally cut it. It sounds like a fucking gunshot going off. It's like, bow, and then it's like literally like sparks everywhere. I was like, holy shit! Like I was like not expecting that at all. Um, and so like it was really interesting. Like I've cut lots of hardened locks. I've cut tons of American locks. What else? So like when we got to that Brinks one, I was like, oh, I'm curious to see like how good they, how much force it's going to take to actually cut this. And no shit, man, that thing went off, boom, and I was like, whoa, holy shit, man. So it was surprising for me to see that too, and I'm like, oh, that's good. That's some good data, because obviously you have up to your like 70, 75 millimeter shackles. And then you have the boron carbide, which is now another thing. And now you also have the octagonally shaped boron carbide shackles, which not a problem for if you're using like your hydraulic cutters. But if you're using straight hand cutters, it is a problem because the different angles that the blade is now taking is reducing your cutting power. So it's like, shit. Like, how do I get past the fact that this has, I'm like, yeah, use a cutting wheel. That's super. You can definitely get past it with a cutting wheel. That's not an issue. But now you're giving up the silence portion, you know.
What are the those thermite? They're kind of like thermite pins. What are they're like
breach pins?
Breach pins? Have you played with any of those? I keep meaning to get some to play with.
I haven't, and I refuse.
Refuse. Why do you refuse?
So I've talked about this a lot. So one, nobody worth their salt has ever backed that equipment. Two, I saw that you need a proprietary kind of spray in order to cool off the slag that comes off of it. So if you don't have the proprietary like cooling agent, it'll continue to burn on the ground like hot magma for I don't know how long.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. Because I remember making thermite like back in high school, and like, oh shit, this is scary. Like,
yeah. So I'm like, I don't know if I can justify one, the price, and then two, giving up that light discipline for such a long time. And with the stuff that they were cutting with it, it wasn't a fast process. And then two, I'm like, I could have just gotten a big pair of bolt cutters, cut this giant. I could have cut, this rebar with two dudes, and then just dropped the bolt cutters and never talked about it again. With no light signature, no hot 3,000 degree slag and magma on the ground that someone can possibly step on and end up getting injured over. So I'm like, no, there's no way. I was like, I can't. There's nothing in my common sense sector of my brain that is saying this is a usable product for me. And what
that's fair. But the monkey sensor of my brain sees it and goes,
yeah, and I'm like, that's cool as fuck.
Cool.
Yeah. Which is like, that's cool. Like if I'm using it to like start a fire, cool, definitely, 100%. Like starting a fire in the rain, dope, man. This is awesome.
I bet it'll do
it. Even destroying equipment. So I think that has a huge use case there, right? Like so we have our thermite grenades inside of our vehicles, mainly because we have like JVCBs, like literal computers, like Blue Force trackers, like the Thor systems that block signals for like IEDs and shit like that. Stuff like that we don't want falling into foreign hands. So if our truck gets disabled and we need to leave, then we cook off a thermite grenade, we drop it on anything that's important to destroy it. Makes sense. That is the use case I can see for the breach pin if I wanted something a little bit more directed. So I'm like, all right, cool. Where are all the important components here? Cool. Crack it, melt it, get the fuck out of Dodge. Makes all the sense in the world. But how many people is that a use case for?
Very few. Very few. And that's not what they're marketing or sold for either. They sell them like burn through this chain, burn through this lock,
Yeah, I'm like, I can do a whole litany of things to get through the things that you're talking about right now, and none of it's calling me to get a $50 breach pen to get through this thing. Like, sorry, man.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it looks fun. I would still like to play with one, but like,
absolutely.
I'm gonna be real with myself. I'm playing, like, like.
No, I would love to try it out one day, and I might even make like not a review, but kind of like my thoughts on it. And
you should.
I've already started doing that with certain pages on Instagram and on YouTube, and just being like, okay, here's the problem with this thing, and just kind of laying out all the problems. Like I recently did it with Dirty Civilians, They have a massive following. They have like
I watched.
200,000 subscribers. Oh, did you see? Yeah. So that
It
like
was
sparked a
all
fire, and
valid
now like
as
people,
fuck.
yeah, and they were like
Did they
making
respond
memes
to you?
about them and stuff. What's up?
Did they respond to you?
They didn't. I didn't even tag them, so it wasn't something where I was like trying to start a fight or anything like that. It was like, okay, I see this video, I see all the problems. Here's the context. This is why it's fucked up. Here's what you can do to make to remedy the situation, and I called it because I don't think they're gonna respond, and if they do, I don't think it's gonna even. It's they're not gonna respond in a way that I'm gonna respect it. So
Sure.
I was like, there. I don't know if someone's gonna just get in their ego and their feelings and be like, oh, who the fuck is this guy? I'm like, one, I ain't shit, my guy. I say that shit all the time. I'm a nobody. I am an average dime a dozen veteran. That's it, man. I have a little bit more experience than you in certain things, and that's it. I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm an SME and everything. I'm just like, here's common sense. Here's what led me to this conclusion. This is why you're gonna die if you take the route you're gonna take. That's pretty much, or not die. But your patient might die. But that's really
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm not trying to shit on you guys. I'm just trying to say like for the guys watching you that also have no skill, they have no background, no reference for how this should be conducted, and they think that's how they're gonna do it. I'm here to set the record straight for those guys. You
Right.
guys have that's a massive 200,000 followers is not a joke. That's a lot of impressionable people that are going to take this as information that they should put in their back pocket, and they're going to fuck it up at some point in time.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, let's fix the record before this really gets out of hand. Um, they may like that, they might not like that. I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
Again, dude, I ain't shit. Like I have my
Yeah.
own jobs and shit to deal with, but I'm just like, well, let's put some common sense into this. And my background, it may be good enough for some people, it might not be, and I'm okay with that either way. I'm hoping my common sense shines over whatever my background is.
Yeah,
So
well, that's the way it always should be. You should never, that's the whole appeal to authority fallacy thing, right? Where it's
yeah,
like, yeah, but no, like what can the person do? What do they clearly know? Like that's so much more important than like what job did they have for 6 months? Like there's things that are so much more important. And that's yeah, I don't know,
yeah,
man. That's if somebody tells me I was a physical pen tester for 5 years and they can't tell me how to do any of the things that I've figured out, like I'm probably not gonna hold a whole lot of stake in what they say.
yeah.
Like
And that's good because like you have and so people think that experience is just like I know how to do everything every single time to perfection. No, I'm like, but what I do know how to do is I can sift through bullshit like nobody's business. That's
yeah,
what being experienced in something really gives you. Is it's like, okay, I can see that this isn't correct. And that's good. Now I know I can just push this to the side and I know what the correct information is. Doesn't mean I'm super proficient at it, doesn't mean I'm the most competent at it, but I can smell the bullshit anytime the bullshit's out. So
right.
that's a huge superpower when it comes to the information age, right? Because that's where we're at right now. We're in the golden age of information. Everything's at your fingertips on a supercomputer you can hold in your hands. So that's really what comes with the experience. It's like in the age of information, you can sift through bullshit a lot easier.
Yeah, no, that's a solid point, man. That's a solid point. Well, is there anything that you guys do that are cool we didn't talk about? You got anything else?
This is getting posted online.
Yeah, we can cut stuff out, but yeah.
After we stop recording, I can tell you, but there's some stuff I can't, and it's not because I'm
All
some super
right.
secret squirrel. That ain't it. I promise.
Yeah, no,
But
I got it. Well, if you wanna, we can sign out here and
yeah, for
we can
sure,
chat a
we can
little bit
definitely do that.
offline.
And I can tell you
Well,
about some recent stuff.
well, dude, man, I appreciate you coming on and chatting. Like I said, this whole podcast is kind of like I said, it's a spinoff where it's just like people that I think are cool, things that I think are cool, and I'm just wanting to kind of just both educate people who care to listen, and also just kind of have fun and get people out there for us. Where like there's a lot of people, we're heavy in the infosec, and I doubt a lot of these people would cross into your circle to learn about the classes that you offer that I think are super valuable for people. And so I kind of wanted to, bring you on and get you, a little bit in front of them and also just, entertain and
Yeah,
have some fun and shoot the shit. And so I super much, very much appreciate you coming on and
absolutely.
hanging out,
I
man.
appreciate. I appreciate you having me, dude. And while we're here, there is something I can talk about, but this was training. This is a course. But it's not like it's not real. It has some real world elements, but it's not real world. But I will tell you this anyway. So, I'm not going to tell you who runs the course. Actually, I can tell you who runs the course. So it's my buddy Pat. He runs on Center Tactical. So we commonly, as instructors, we go to each other's courses. So he comes to my course, I go to his courses, and we'll just be students, unless we're collaborating. So we have collab courses as well, where we and him will get together, or me, him, and my wife, and me, him, and his soon-to-be wife. We'll all get together and we'll instruct throughout the weekend, collab on different scenarios and stuff. And it's cool to see our different teaching styles. So he put on his advanced course before we started putting ours on. And so one of the scenarios was, and it was heavily based around key generation, because obviously we're in an advanced course. So all the skills, the coding and the picking and everything else is stuff that's way in the back pocket for us. We already got that in the bag. So we focused super heavily on key generation for this course, which landed us in some very interesting scenarios. So Aaron Sattler, he's one of my former students as well. So we're both in this advanced course. There was a Navy SEAL there that ended up not being able to stay the entire time, so he bounced out. So it's me and Aaron now doing this. I was supposed to be an instructor for that course just to help out, and I ended up being a student instead. So we're doing this thing where we have to tail someone downtown. So we're tailing someone downtown in order to get a picture of their key. Right. And you can imagine how weird that is, especially in a really lively city.
So, I love that. Oh my God, I love that.
It was a lot of fun. So we're tailing this person downtown. Okay, so I'm gonna give a little bit more of this because it jumps the pucker factor up a little bit. So one of my friends, he lent his grown daughter to us for this exercise. She is aware of this exercise. And so she knows that we're tailing. She'll know when she sees us that we're tailing her. So she's down there with her boyfriend, I'm assuming was at the time. And so we get our information. We're like, hey, your target's here. You need to find them and then tail them to wherever they're going, which happened to be a restaurant. Or wasn't a restaurant. It was a cafe. So it's like pouring rain. It's fucking as shitty as times. And we're getting pissed on. We're trying to find our target. And so we're just walking through downtown and we're trying to, so we end up catching them. And we're like, oh, there they are. So we see them walking to this place. We go in behind them, but we split up. So me and Aaron, we split up. I was like, hey, Aaron, I'll walk in first and grab a seat, hopefully with a good vantage point. But we didn't want to sit together because if I didn't get a good vantage point, we'd be hamstrung to that table. So we wouldn't have any good angle. So I was like, hey, I'm going to sit by myself. You go find a different seat with a different vantage point of her bag, because her bag had the key on it. And so we're like, all right, cool. So I go in first. I grab a coffee and a cinnamon bun. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I go down, I sit down, I try and get into like the right angle to get the bag. There's so much extra stuff that comes into play with this shit, and it's so funny to watch it all happen in real time. You're like, oh, why is this not working right now? And so I come in, I text Aaron, I'm like, hey, dude, I sat down. I'm like essentially center of the cafe. They're directly in front of me. And so he's like, all right, Roger, coming in. So it comes in. And so one thing we don't notice when we're doing something real world is our demeanor while doing it. And so not understanding what the baseline of the environment is and how you're coming off into the environment, people can feel the difference between people that are jovial and that are just at a cafe versus people that are extremely, extremely serious and that are like kind of like bent on the mission. That can expose you super quick.
That's one of the most important things with us, with what we do, physical fence. Like that's so important. One of the most important, almost more important than what you know, like how you present.
Yeah. So like we didn't even notice like we're giving off like super serious vibes, and it ends up becoming apparent to people that work there. So granted, like this is still uncontrolled environment. They don't know we're doing this exercise. Right. So and so her father is also watching us. So he's watching us watch his daughter. So he's also kind of doing his own exercise in the corner of the restaurant with like his iPad, watching us watch his daughter. So it's a whole freaking thing. Um, so we're like, okay. So I get my seat, I start eating, and I'm trying to like get a picture of my food. So I'm trying to use this as the moment to get the picture. So like, you know how people like social media age, everyone does their pictures and they're trying to get their cool angles for their food. So we use it like that.
Yeah,
And so I'm
nice.
like, all right, cool, man.
Nice.
I'm trying to get this picture and I like kind of tilt it a little bit. And I'm like, try to get her bag in the background so I can zoom in on the key. And so I get a couple of pictures and I'm like, I bring him back down. I like kind of zoom in and it gets super pixelated. And I'm just like, bah! Now I gotta be weird again and take another picture somehow. I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I have to figure out a human solution to get closer to them so I can get a cleaner shot of this key that's hanging over the bag. Because originally I thought I had enough room to just take it from my seat and just be like looking at my phone and take a picture. But can't do that because one, you also have to be careful of who's behind you because people's eyes wander. They can see your phone. They see like you're trying to take a picture of this girl, right? Creeper status. That's a problem.
Right.
And then there's also the seats. So the seats were at a certain height that was blocking the key from my vantage point. And I was just like, God damn it. And so Aaron's at a different spot of the restaurant trying to get a picture as well. And he's like, I can't see shit. The back of the chair is right in the way. And so like it is all going to shit for us. And we're just like, what the fuck? And so like we're trying to do some weird shit, right? So Pat and another one of the instructors was watching us. And so we're being watched by two separate people conducting this exercise. So it is so fucking weird, dude. So they're like videotaping us. And I'm like, I break character for a moment and I go get one of them. And I'm like, oh, that's my friend over there. And so I bring them over to the table and we start talking and chatting. So like we're in a larger group now. Pat is super antisocial, bro. So he's like thrown completely off guard. And he's like, I didn't know what to do. So he's sitting there with us and we're chatting. And I'm like, one of the guys that was videotaping has a super high res camera. So I was like, yo, like, let me take a picture of you guys. So I'm now trying to use his very high powered camera to zoom in on this key to get a fucking photo of the key. And I was like, got it, we're good. And so I'm like trying to take this picture now. And the fucking target gets up and moves away. They're done with their meal. They get up and they leave. And I was like, no. So they get up and they walk out. And so me and Aaron were like, all right, so we have to leave at separate times. We can't both get up at the same time and start walking out because it's going to look super weird. So they hadn't gotten up for some reason. I think the boy went to the bathroom. So I told Aaron, I was like, yo, go outside and meet them at the door so you can get a picture of the key when they walk out of the door. And so he looks at me then, and this in the middle of this restaurant, he looks directly at me. A guy that he supposedly doesn't know looks straight at me, and he does like this movie theater nod. He's just like, dude, I lose character for like 5 minutes, and I'm just dying laughing. And I was like, why would you look at me and nod? Like he nodded in the most like spy movie fashion you can fucking do. He just looks at me and just nods, and I was like, Aaron, what are you fucking doing, man? You didn't have to look at me at all. You could have just got the fuck up and walked out, and I understand what you're doing. And he just looks at me, he nods, and I lost my shit for like 5 minutes, and I'm just like, oh my fucking God. So he walks out, he meets them at the door, and I'm like, all right, cool, man, did you get the photo? And he's like, nah, man, my phone died. Dude, it was one thing after another. So I missed a part. So while we're in the restaurant, this woman comes up to me and she's like, oh my God, that looks so good. Like the coffee and the cinnamon bun and stuff like that. So I'm talking to her for a little while. And she goes down and sits with her friend on the other side of the cafe. And so I remember, and I was like, okay, cool. So we follow them to a second cafe. So they leave, the targets go to a second cafe. It's like a mile away. So we start walking there. We finally get there. We see them again. And so like we're kind of just it's a lot more light now. So we're kind of just like we finally get the photo. Lighting's better, but the big thing was for the key generation portion is that the bag was roughly the same color as the key. That fucks up.
Ooh,
yeah. So that's some real world shit you wouldn't know until you encountered it. So if it had been a extremely different contrast of color to key, because it's a bronze key in a tan bag. So it was absolutely screwing up the picture. Even if I got close with the camera after the exercise was over. And I just took a picture of the key up close, and I was like, wow, this is still super pixelated because of how close the colors are together. So without a heavily contrasted, a different contrast of color to color, it was really hard for the camera to pick up the bidding. So, but then, so something else really funny happened, and the two females from the other cafe also walked in after us. So now my ears are perked up because I'm like, that's not a normal thing for humans to do, to go from one cafe, sit down, have, cinnamon bun coffee and stuff like that, and then go to another cafe to do the same exact thing. So now at this point, I'm thinking her father put them up to this, and maybe as one of his like security people or something like that. And so I'm talking to him, and I was like, "Did you put those two females up to this?" And they're just like out here, like they're like, you had us telling, so we were telling your daughter, we were getting watched from multiple angles, and they were also telling us. I'm like, was that what was happening here? And so we think this whole charade is just happening right now. And he's like, no, he's the kind of guy where you can't really tell if he's lying. And so we're just like, we know you, but we know those are some people that you work for. And he was like, and he got really serious. And he was like, I'm serious. I don't know who they are. And so we're just like, we look at each other and we're like, yo. So we're like, were they spies? Were they cops? Like, so like it was, because it was just so far out of left field for that to be a thing. Like, because people don't just go to cafe after cafe after they already had something at a cafe a mile away at the exact same restaurant that we went to. So I was just like, that was so far out of left field, it didn't make any sense. So I'm like, we thought for like no shit, like 3 months that Eric had put them, or shit, I just said his name. Holy crap. Can you block that out, please? So we thought he had put him up. We thought he had put them up to it for the longest time. And he's like, to this day, he sticks to that story. He's like, I swear to God, he's like, I had no idea who they were. He's like, they could have been cops, they could have been feds, they could have been spies from somewhere else. Who knows? He's like, this town is known for it. He's like, this is a very heavily surveilled town, or city. So that was a funny thing that happened during that exercise. And then we'd noticed, like, even when we were in the restaurant and our demeanors were there, like the owner had noticed, some of the patrons had noticed, because once again, we're just so serious, and we didn't notice like how our demeanor was affecting the energy in the baseline around us. So that's super important. It was a huge lesson in like the social engineering aspect of like, you have to match the demeanor of everyone else around you, or else that alone will draw attention to you. Negative attention on top of that, because they might be thinking you could be a school shooter, you could be literally anything, right? And there's like, absolutely, like, what's going on with this guy? So
especially a couple dudes eyeing down a girl, like
a couple of military age males, like and then it's like, dude, it's they're on a mission, right? And so that was super interesting to run into in a training exercise. So,
that's a great exercise, though. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was. There were so many things, because that's more of a tradecraft thing too. Like, that's not like gaining entry and stuff like that. It's a completely different skill set than working on the social spectrum. So, that was a really fun happening that happened during a training exercise. As far as the stuff that I can't necessarily talk about on record, once we end this, I'll definitely divulge some stuff.
We'll get into some of the fun stuff. I apologize for anybody who's still here. But well, man. So I guess tell the people where they can find you, and where we'll put it all in the description and everything. But where can people find you?
All right, yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram on Skypirate_actual. You can go to our business page at Cloaked Entry Co., all one word. And then you can also find my wife over at MySpace, MAI space 2.0. And you can also go over to our website, www.cloakedentryco.com. And also I have a YouTube for Skypirate_actual as well. And I do tons of review videos. I have to review some picks at some point this week or next week. And piss off some more internet YouTubers, some very famous YouTubers. I'm sure I'm going to piss them off this week.
I look forward to it.
Oh, it'll be a good time. So
awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for hopping on here with us, and I'm happy to have you back on again. I'm sure we have lots of
Dude,
stories we
absolutely,
can
man.
share, and yeah, for sure, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thanks, and thank you everybody for watching the Secure After Dark podcast, and we look forward to having you next time.